Nearly every mission in Cyberpunk 2077 is named after a song. I'm sure you've heard this fact before, and it's probably one of my favorite things about the game itself being so intertwined with music, and music itself being such a key factor in this franchise, especially when you take things like the success of Edge Runners and specifically the song that everyone knows and loves. However, I don't think anyone knows how these songs relate to the mission. Of course, some can be on the nose, and I've tried looking around, but I haven't found anything from any creator on this specific subject, but I'd love to be corrected if I am wrong. That being said, this game has a lot of missions. It'll be difficult to put all 3 acts plus Phantom Liberty in one video, so this will be separated into 4, perhaps 5 videos. Acts 1, 2, and 3, Phantom Liberty, and maybe a video specifically for side gigs. Comment down below if that's something you'd like to see, but otherwise, let's get started. Act 1 is a bit difficult to write and research for, honestly, because this is the list of missions. You have the Street Kid, the Rescue, the Gig, the Ripper Doc, Beat on the Brat, the Gun, the Ride, Psycho Killer, Paid in Full, the Pickup, the Information, the Heist, and lastly, Love Like Fire. Each is unlockable in the first act, but 2 aren't required to be completed in the first act. Now let me address the obvious elephant in the room, being that majority of these aren't names of songs and just meant to follow a common theme for the sake of having that first act. However, I took the liberty of choosing my own songs I think would best fit based on what happens in the mission, which brings me to the Street Kid. Now this can change based on the intro you choose, so for the playthrough I did while recording and researching this video, I decided to start with the Street Kid life path. You find yourself in trouble with the cops because you did a job to get a friend out of a debt. I'd say that's relatively honorable, but it all went to shit, honestly. Now, that being said, Sweet Dreams by the Eurythmics would have to start us off. Being the obvious reference to Kirk wanting to use you for his gig that was obviously meant to go wrong, but that can be used for a multitude of fixtures in the game, which is why the rest of the lyrics feel more of an intro than the overall world we find ourselves diving into. Then of course we have our 6-month montage with Jackie and find ourselves having to do the rescue for Wakako Okada. Now this mission features a tutorial and our first real enemy encounter, so just for the sake of having something badass but not too over the top playing, I'd have to go with Shimmy Shimmy Ya by one of my personal favorites, ODB. Going through this section, stealth or not, with honestly any Wu-Tang member would be a fit, but ODB specifically because this song paired with action always works. If you don't believe me, guys, take a look at the movie The Gentleman. It's probably one of the best uses of this specific song with an action sequence. The next mission is named The Gig, and it of course happens when Watson is put into lockdown after the gig Jackie and V completed for Wakako. Not too much happens in this gig besides a car chase as a result of completing the rescue, which is actually what starts this trend of the game switching between mission names depending on what you're doing. The Gig is the mission name while you're waiting for lockdown to end, while the rescue flashes up while the car chase begins until that ends. It's a small but cool detail highlighting how certain objectives don't always fit what you're doing in terms of name, as well as how you can be doing many missions at the same time. All this to say, Heat by 50 Cent. Probably one of the easier choices for me just because it's a great radio song to play in the background, but also fits the car chase that happens in this very mission. Now eventually V gets home, sleeps, wakes up, and realizes they have to go to the Ripper Doc. It's also when Jackie presents us with the gig that will change everything for better or worse. Picking a song that has a Ripper Doc / Victor feel to it while also meant to feel like impending doom is difficult, but I Wouldn't Want to Be Like You by the Alan Parsons Project fits perfectly. This song was actually famously used in another video game during the Death Wish mission in GTA 5 when Trevor is bringing Devin to his demise at the end of the game, but it honestly also fits the theme of a Ripper Doc. Ripper Docs are some of the more regular looking people in Cyberpunk with little to no cyberware that we can see, meaning they probably don't personally enjoy using much of it, and it's also a point Victor makes himself.
Though, really, Doc? Makes you sound like a dentist, always going on and on.
Don't be mean now. Remember, I'm old. I got a shaky Gannic hand. Could slip.
It also seems like something Victor will probably listen to for old time's sake during his operations, and fits well for that uneasy feeling for what's to come with working for Dexter Deshawn. However, this also gives us the mission Paid in Full. V owes Vic for all the times he installed cyberware for him, and of course, it's a reference to, in my opinion, one of the best duos ever, the Eric B. and Rakim song. Before we continue, let's just backtrack a little bit. Before V left to see Jackie and Vic, he picked up 2 smaller gigs, the first being Beat on the Brat. Beat on the Brat is the very beginning of the trend of Cyberpunk having songs as mission names, being a song by the Ramones. The song itself is said to be about the time band member Joey Ramone saw a mother chasing a boy with a bat in a hotel lobby, but Joey himself said it's more about wanting to attack a spoiled middle-class child with no discipline. It's honestly hilarious in hindsight, and the record itself does feel like it would make for the perfect montage song of V beating up everybody around Night City, as that's what the mission is actually about. In the same area after picking up Beat on the Brat, V can go ahead to retrieve the gun. I won't spend too much time on this one as it's really just a mission about retrieval, but you can choose the song I Love My Chopper by TK. It's kind of a meme at this point, but it also just fits perfectly. Going back to the Ripper doc, V picks up one gig just before taking the ride. He gets a call from fixer Regina Jones about possibly having a cure for cyberpsychosis, which is running rampant in Night City, turning those with too much cyberware into psychopaths. While technically a side mission, this collection of gigs is dubbed Psycho Killer. Much like Beat on the Brat, Psycho Killer is pretty on the nose for its actual meaning with regard to the collection of gigs it represents, as it's about psychopathic killers. However, it also feels like a legitimate look at the mental state of someone with cyberpsychosis. The lyrics feel like something ripped right out of a cyberpsycho's diary, explaining how they feel about what they've become and what their daily thoughts actually are. V then finally meets Dexter Deshawn, the man who's supposed to take him and Jackie into the major leagues of mercenaries, and takes the ride with him. The ride is very tense as Dex is giving us information regarding the job he has for us, as well as seeing what we're like as a person. To get that tense feeling, I'd have to go with Crocodile Tears by J. Cole. Of course, you guys may have noticed there's a tiny trend here with rap being the main genre I'm pulling from. It's my favorite genre, and I honestly feel like the genre itself fits very well in the cyberpunk world. For this specific moment, however, the sinister piano progression that sort of builds at the start of the song puts such a feeling of doom and dread that it immediately could make the mission seem tense. Having been brought up to speed with the information given to us by Dex, that brings us to meeting the client that brought Dex the gig to begin with, Evelyn Parker. Immediately, to describe Lizzie's, the place that Evelyn operates out of, the song that came to mind was Think by Khalida. The beat, lyrics, aesthetic, and just every element of the song feels like it belongs in a club. Not to mention, the lyrics could also be used to reflect the relationship between Yorinobu and Evelyn herself, as there's also some Japanese used in the song. If you guys want an example of this song being used in a club, I would highly recommend watching the first John Wick movie, as it's pretty prevalent in that movie and it's part of one of the more memorable scenes in that movie. Following this mission, we meet with the Maelstrom on behalf of Dex to make the pickup of a necessary item for the heist. Dex needs us to retrieve it from the Maelstrom because he purchased it from their old leader, Royce. However, Royce was killed by his second-in-command, Brick, leaving Dex wondering if he planned to honor the word of his predecessor. Given that no matter what happens, this mission ends in a shootout, I'd honestly have to go with the song Broadfoot by Slaughter to prevail. Honestly, most of the missions in this game could have the song playing and it would fit perfectly, but because of how the Maelstrom are by nature and their aggressive tendencies, the song feels like the perfect fit for them and the mission alike. Finally, we reach the heist. I won't rehash this specific mission because it's probably the one you guys remember the most, but I've honestly had a few songs in mind to play during this entire mission, considering it's a bit difficult to just settle on one. Also considering it's meant to have the heist feeling with the high stakes, my mind immediately goes to jazz or some variation for some reason. Just something calm, but it can still provide that sense of urgency or just that intense feeling. After a genuinely long amount of time deciding, the song sort of hit me in the face, and I am gonna go with Like Me by Joey Badass featuring BJ the Chicago Kid. The first time I ever heard this song, I immediately pictured this song playing during the start of a heist movie while the credits play and introduce us to the characters. There's also a specific part where Joey raps these lines that I think resonate with V perfectly and how the heist itself ends up going. I especially want to highlight the line about the place he calls home not allowing him to continue his legacy, as that perfectly encapsulates the journey that we're about to go on with Night City. This brings me to the mission Love Like Fire. While technically we've reached the end of the first act, it wasn't the start of the second act. This mission specifically is the first time we are introduced to Keanu Reeves' character Johnny Silverhand. Not only that, but we learn what he did, or didn't do, but I've already discussed that, to Arasaka in 2023, and it's also one of the first flashbacks we get into Johnny's life before he died. Love Like Fire, much like a lot of the songs on this list, is a title that's used by a lot of bands, but this is specifically from Generation X. The song itself is about meeting a woman and falling in love. Very simple. Gaining that desire for someone so badly that it begins to feel like your insides are burning and the only thing you want is that person. Even having them doesn't make the fire go away, but makes it burn even brighter than before. As for what it means for Johnny, it could absolutely be in reference to why he's storming Arasaka. He has his reasons, but if anyone remembers correctly, Alt dying by their hand is absolutely one of the main things motivating him. The song itself could also serve as an allegory for a goal, a passion you're chasing, and there's nothing you won't do to get it. Johnny has a passion for destruction and a hatred for Arasaka that's quite honestly unrivaled, so this song absolutely works. And now we finally reach the true end of Act 1. In Part 2, it may be a hefty one as we try and break down the entirety of Act 2 and what those songs mean. There will be less interpretation with regard to the song choice, as it's there that every single mission is named after a song, but I'm excited to analyze the songs actually chosen by the devs as titles for the missions. Analyzing music is definitely something new to me for this channel, but I've always thought deeply about the art itself. I hope you guys can gain something from this, and maybe comment down below what songs you'd use for Act 1, or just what you thought about my choices in general. Stay tuned for Part 2, take care of yourself and one another, peace.